La claqueta, es que no he visto la claqueta. Welcome again, everybody. We are beginning the last session of this interesting meeting. And now we are giving its turn to Professor Juan Codoñer, who shall talk about Byzantine studies in Spain, past and future.
Thank you. Well, it's a great pleasure and honor to be here in this magnificent building with such an important audience of colleagues and friends, and with the support of the Instituto Cervantes and the embassy. I will speak in my condition of president of the Spanish Society of Byzantine Studies and as a classical philologist. I will speak obviously about the context exchanges between Byzantium and Eastern Mediterranean in the Middle Ages. The Byzantine civilization lasted more than 1,000 years and is sadly neglected in our studies in Spain, both obviously at the secondary school and even at our universities. However, Byzantium was crucial for shaping modern Europe, and as it is now. I will do my best and try to convince, if you are not already convinced, of the importance of studying the connections between Spain and Byzantium in the Middle Ages. These connections are worth of study and of sponsoring. Well, I start introducing the Spanish Society of Byzantine Studies. We are a small society with approximately 120 members, most of them scholars working in different fields related to Byzantium: philologists, historians, art historians, theologians, archaeologists. We are working together in the same field. It's not the same with the studies in antiquity, as you all know, where antiquity is studied by different disciplines. This is not the case of Byzantium. It's a young society. It was founded in 2008 with the purpose of providing a basis for the activities of all these researchers, as there are no official studies on Byzantium at Spanish universities. Only very recently, our society has created a one-year expert course, postgraduate on Byzantium, hosted by the universities of Alcalá and Complutense. Despite these shortcomings, that is the small number of Byzantine scholars and our short history as association, we have been very active in the last 15 years and succeeded in promoting the study of Byzantium among many students and colleagues who attend to our seminar and congresses and follow our activities. You can get an idea of what is going on the field of Byzantine studies just by browsing in our web on the screen and clicking in the different sections. One of them is a list of all the publications on Byzantium by Spanish scholars, amounting to thousands of items. We also sponsor a yearly scientific journal, Estudios Bizantinos, now hosted by the University of Alcalá, with free access at the web, and from this year on, also with a printed version. We have edited 10 numbers until now, and I got ideas for this presentation precisely from some of the articles published there. We also produce a bulletin of our activities that appears every 4 months and is to download freely from the web. On the screen you see the last issue, number 40. Well, in fact, not the last issue, but the last issue appeared yesterday, 41. We also sponsor and foster a new collection of Byzantine texts, built bilingual, Greek and Spanish, Bucoleon. It is printed by the Remata Publishing House. On the screen you see the first number, The Praise of the Two Romes by Manuel Crisoloras. And also, since its constitution, the Spanish Society of Byzantine Studies has been organizing general congresses on Byzantium every 3 years, approximately. The last one, that convened in Madrid past January, lasted 4 days and had over 100 interventions of scholars, of which approximately 4 scholars were coming from abroad, including Greece. Finally, we have also organized exhibitions on occasion of our scientific meetings, such as the one you have on the screen, on Byzantium and Spain. And this leads to the second point of my presentation. that is, that we will deal with the presence of Byzantium in the Iberian Peninsula. Obviously, Spain was, Obviously, Spain was closely connected with Constantinople in the 4th century, when the empire was still united and the western part had not yet been conquered by the Germans. Even in the 5th century, when the Visigoths settled in Spain, the connections remained, for the Visigoths ruled Spain in the name of the Emperor of Constantinople, theoretically, and imitated imperial ceremonies. The iconography of many mosaics of Spanish villae is to be interpreted at the light of Eastern models in some cases. For instance, the villa of Noeda in Cuenca, in central Spain, you see the mosaics of Noeda on the screen, presents clear indications of Eastern influence, both in the technique of the mosaics as in the images and dresses of the persons depicted in it. When the Visigoths started to act independently from Constantinople, the empire sent troops who occupied the southern part of the Iberian Peninsula. The Byzantine occupation of the peninsula lasted from 552 to 624, although the Balearic Islands remained under the influence of Constantinople and approximately until the year 900, when the Arabs invaded and occupied the archipelago, 200 years after they had invaded the peninsula. This Byzantine occupation of Spain has left important traces on our soil, although they are not very well known. Let us see 3 instances. Today's Cartagena, the Carthago Spartaria of the Byzantines, was probably the capital of Byzantine Spain, although this is a very much debated issue. Spanish archaeologists have been conducting excavations since decades and found important remains of the Byzantine occupation of the city. Needless to say, they need to compare their founds with similar ones on the Eastern Mediterranean. For instance, the scattered pieces of a lamellar armor found in Cartagena, typical of the Byzantine soldiers of the period, but not much attested, have been compared with other findings in the Balkans and Anatolia. Excavations in Septem, today's Ceuta, the Spanish town in North Africa, have discovered remains of the Justinianic wall beneath the walls of the Umayyads. This needs again to be compared with similar findings in the empire. Moreover, this finding confirms the report preserved by Procopius of Caesarea, one of the most famous Greek historians of the 6th century, who mentioned the walls and other buildings of the reign of Justinian. Moreover, it appears that the system of fortification promoted by the Umayyads was somehow inspired or continued the imperial and Byzantine fortifications. A third and last example, the fortress of Alarum in the mountain range in the northern part of Majorca is a medieval construction, but it was constructed over a Byzantine fortress where the Christian inhabitants of the islands faced Arab invasion for 10 years, during 10 years, around the year 900. They were defeated and the islands were conquered by the Arabs. Majorca belonged to the Byzantine Commonwealth until this time, during the 8th and 9th centuries, and this kind of defense, centered on strongholds not far away from the seashore, was a Byzantine tactic attested in other islands, as for instance Rometa in Sicily. Again, in this third instance, comparison with models of defense from the East is needed in order to understand what was going on in the islands at the time. But the influence of Byzantium in the Iberian Peninsula is not only linked with the short period of Byzantine occupation of the southern part of the peninsula. The presence in Spain of objects coming from Byzantium is certainly not so abundant as in Italy, but it is significant. Consider, for instance, this capital, from a column of the church of Saint Paulictus in Constantinople. Saint Paulictus was an impressive church built by the noblewoman Julia Anicia in the 6th century, so impressive that the Emperor Justinian felt obliged to build a bigger church, Santa Sofia, Hagia Sophia. Saint Paulictus was destroyed by the Crusaders when Constantinople was taken in 1204, but one of its capitals ended up, we don't know how, in a Gothic church of Barcelona at the end of the Middle Ages. Now, after the church was destroyed during the Spanish Civil War, it is in a museum in Barcelona. But beyond the material objects from Byzantium that came to Spain, the influence of Byzantium in Spain is mainly to be substantiated through Greek books. that came to the Iberian Peninsula at different times and had a big influence on the culture and spirituality of the different periods of the Middle Ages. So, for instance, many religious Greek books on monasticism coming from the East were translated into Latin in Spain by Paschasius of Dumius and Martin of Braga in the 6th century in northwest Spain, in Galicia. Recent excavations have even established that there were some Cenobitic monasteries in Galicia founded by Paschasius and Martin, and that these monasteries even followed the architectural pattern of the Eastern monasteries. The mosaics of the dome of the Mihrab, the mosque of Cordoba, were made by Byzantine workers. They were sent in the 10th century by the Emperor Constantine VII to the ruler of Cordoba, the Caliph Abd-al-Rahman III. Both Caliph and Emperor made a military alliance against the Fatimids of North Africa. This is well known. Less known, however, are the many embassies and diplomatic exchanges between the Emperor and the Umayyad Caliph of Cordoba in the 10th century. Some of them have been object of interest in Spain since the 19th century, and a Catalan painter even represented one of them in a famous picture, Dionís Baixeras y Verdaguer. Among the presents the Byzantine ambassadors in Cordoba carried with them, we find again books. Books for the Umayyad Caliph in Cordoba. Some of them, as the Dioscorides, the reference book for pharmacology in Antiquity and Middle Ages, greatly influenced the Arabic science. When the Arab power vanished in the Iberian Peninsula, the Christian kingdom of Aragon resumed the contacts with the Byzantine East. We will immediately trace the influence of the Aragonese and the Catalans in Byzantium, and for the moment it will suffice to say that many Byzantine princesses married to the royal house of Aragon or simply established themselves in our country. One famous case is that of Batatza Lascaris, granddaughter of the Emperor Theodorus III Lascaris, who traveled to Aragon and ended as a court lady of Queen Elizabeth of Portugal. And we see here her tomb in a church of Coimbra in Portugal with the Byzantine double-headed eagle. And to close our hasty survey, again with books, we must wait until the 16th century for the mass arrival of Byzantine Greek manuscripts in Spain, bought by nobles or by the powerful monarchy of the Habsburgs, mainly by Philip II in the first place, who founded the Escorial Library Monastery. As a result, the libraries of El Escorial, of the University of Salamanca and the Biblioteca Nacional de Madrid have now huge collections of hundreds of priceless Byzantine manuscripts, which are invaluable for knowing the Byzantine past. Well, this is Byzantium in Spain. Let's change now to Spain in Byzantium. The presence of Byzantium in Spain is obviously very important, but it must also be complemented with the presence of Spain in Byzantium, which is an essential part not only of our history, but also of the European history in the late Middle Ages. The Crusades supposed the start of an era of travels of Westerners to the East, where Byzantium played a key role, obviously, as being in the middle way to Jerusalem. Already in the 12th century, we have testimonies of Spanish travelers who were in the East and left behind important testimonies of their experiences. Perhaps the most famous of them was the Spanish Jew Benjamin de Tudela of Navarra, who undertook a long travel from Spain to Palestine. You see the itinerary on the screen. There is another travel of an Arab traveler to the east that doesn't concern us in the moment. Benjamin crossed the Balkans and Anatolia, recording in detail not only every Jew community he visited on his way, but also all the impressions he got from the cities and places he saw. From the second half of the 13th century, the Crown of Aragon started an expansion through the Mediterranean that first led to the occupation of Sicily and southern Italy, and later to the presence of Catalan mercenaries in the Byzantine Empire, who founded at the very beginning of the 14th century the Duchy of Athens. You see the borders of the duchy on the screen. The Catalans left, as we know, no good memories in Greece due to the plundering and looting of the northern territories of Byzantium when they forced their way to Athens from Thrace. But the main thing is that the Catalan presence in the Eastern Mediterranean paved the way for cultural and artistic exchanges between Byzantium and the Crown of Aragon. One of the most important consequences of the presence of the Aragonese in the Eastern Mediterranean was the translation of Greek books into Aragonese language at the end of the 14th century. It was a systematic project sponsored and patronized by Juan Fernández de Heredia, who was the great master of the Hospitalier Knights in the islands of Rhodes. Translations were made at the time, remember it is the 14th century, translations into Aragonese of the history of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides, the parallel lives of Plutarch, the history of Thonaras, and the Chronicle of Morea. We have preserved all these translations in very luxurious copies. We are all introduced by a portrait of the great master on the screen. All of them have been critically edited in Aragon, of course, for the language, Aragonese, language used, is one of the most important testimonies of Aragonese language now extinct. In this respect, it must be stressed that these were the first translations ever made of classical authors into a modern language, even before the translation made in Italy in the 15th century. The difficulties of the enterprise were enormous, for classical Greek was a language that was to be studied by contemporary Greeks. Therefore, the translation, as established by the modern editors of the text, was not a direct translation, but was undertaken in successive phases, as you can see in the scheme on the screen. Material remains of the Catalan presence in Greece are not very abundant, but one of them is well known, that is the famous tower that presided over the Acropolis and that was demolished at the end of the 19th century, when the archaeologists tried to restore the ancient image of the hill and remove every medieval or modern intervention. Today, it would have been a difficult decision to take, perhaps, I hope, but in the past, it has been a constant of modern archaeology to ignore the medieval Byzantine remains in order to reach the important antique layers. Things have changed a lot in the last decades, but Byzantine archaeology is still in its infancy, compared with the classical archaeology, as you will know. The presence of Catalans in Greece is, however, not just important for the history of Greece, but for the history of the Crown of Aragon. Professor Manuel Castiñeras, a leading art historian in Barcelona, has, for instance, followed the influence of Byzantine painters in the Gothic paintings of late Middle Ages, both in Italy and Aragon. Influence which in some cases went along with the diffusion of some cults, such as Saint Nicholas or Saint George. The case of Saint George, one of the most popular military saints in Byzantium ever, is revealing. For the saint became, at the end, the most popular saint in Aragon and saintly patron of the Aragonese crown. Jorge is today a very popular name in Catalonia. You see on the screen a fresco painting of a church in Paleojora, that is the Catalan settlement in the island of AEGEAN, that the Catalans occupied for almost a century and a half, 150 years. There are Latin inscriptions in the ruined church of Paleojora that testify the interests of the Catalan and Aragonese aristocrats in the island. The studies of the archives of the Crown of Aragon, but also of the Italian Sea Republics, Venice and Genoa, testify the presence of Catalan traders in many cities of the Eastern Mediterranean, where they made big fortunes, but also served as agents of cultural exchanges. The Catalans had consulats del mar, consulships of the sea, or maritime consulships, in many important cities of the Eastern Mediterranean, such as Alexandria or Antioch. Moreover, there were travelers from Spain in diplomatic missions in Constantinople in the last 2 centuries of the empire, such as Ruiz González de Clavijo in 1403, on his way to Samarkand, to the capital of the Tamerlan Empire, and especially Pero Tafur in 1437. The text of, you see the editions of both reports of the travelers. Perotafur is especially interesting, not only because he claimed to be a relative of the emperor, John VIII Palaeologos, and really not clearly explained the relation he describes in his book with the emperor, with whom he talked confidently, because they were relatives, apparently. Well, in any case, it is also interesting his minute description of the buildings of Constantinople, even of the imperial library. It's the only description we have of the imperial library, that without any parallel in other preserved sources of travelers to the imperial capital. Well, in any case, I think we don't need excuses for studying Byzantium. I have given here some hasty examples of the links that connect the Iberian Peninsula and Byzantium during the Middle Ages. Examples that, so I hope, support the need of a permanent institution of Spain in Greece for sponsoring the research in a good number of fields. In this sense, I have displayed a variety of topics that testimony the richness of the past research and illustrate the many possibilities that are open to researchers in the future. The future of our discipline is brilliant, for a lot of research is still awaiting, that will certainly provide new evidences of the intense cultural exchanges that existed between the two opposite sides of the Mediterranean basin. However, the need for a Spanish house in Greece cannot be based only on these historical connections between Byzantium and the Iberian Peninsula in the Middle Ages. Byzantium was a major civilization, a global civilization, whose influence went well beyond its borders, marked so approximately with a red oval on the screen. And the surrounding Greek areas belonged in different times to the Byzantine influence area. Many cultures, nations, peoples got their faith, culture, and literature from the Byzantines. So we can properly speak of a Byzantine Commonwealth, which comprised nations in the Balkans, in Russia, in the Caucasus, in the Middle East, in the Horn of Africa, to the south of Egypt. I have here no time to prove my assertion with arguments. I will therefore limit myself to show two sets of images of objects that speak for themselves. Inscriptions in Greek or in Greek alphabet are found outside the borders of the empire, thus confirming the influence of the Byzantine civilization. I have marked with 3 red dots in the map 3 places where the influence of the Byzantine civilization was strongly felt: Sardinia, Nubia, and Bulgaria. On the screen you see an image of a manuscript of the 11th century written in Sardian, the Romance language of Sardinia, but in Greek alphabet. Sardian was, if not the first, but one of the first Romance languages to be written with the Greek alphabet. For the island was part of the Byzantine Commonwealth and was also the unavoidable link of Byzantium with the Iberian Peninsula through the Balearics. The second example is an inscription of Nubia in Greek of the 11th century. Nubians used the Greek language for their records since their conversion to Christianity in the 6th century. They remained faithful to the Greek culture despite their isolation from the rest of the Byzantine Commonwealth and the rest of Christianity for many centuries since the conquest of Egypt by Arabs in 641. The third example is Bulgaria. Tsar Simeon, the emperor of the Bulgars and the Romans, adopted a modified version of the Greek alphabet to write Slavic at the end of the 9th or beginning of the 10th century. That is what we usually call Cyrillic alphabet. He abandoned the use of Glagolitic alphabet devised by the apostles of the Slavs, Cyril and Methodius, shortly before. Glagolitic, why did he so? Glagolitic was a very different alphabet from the Greek one and created a graphic barrier between Greeks and Bulgarians. Simeon wanted to suppress any graphic barrier between Greeks and Bulgars, and this is why he renounced to the Glagolitic and adopted the Greek letters for writing Slavic. On the screen you see a tile in Cyrillic from Preslav, the Bulgarian capital, dating to the 10th century. Well, a second short set of images will also prove my argument of the irradiation and influence of Byzantine culture well beyond its borders. Now we will show two crowns in Hungary and Sicily, marked also the places with red dots on the screen. To the left you see the crown of Constanza of Aragon, of the royal Aragonese family, a woman of Frederick II, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire and king of Italy. We are in the 13th century. To the right, we see the royal crown sent by the Byzantine Emperor Michael VII to the Hungarian king of the 11th century. It's the famous crown of Saint Stephen, the crown with which almost all the kings of Hungary were crowned until very recently. This second crown was made in Constantinople, whereas Constanza's crown wasn't. However, both imitate the imperial Byzantine crown, as made evident by this image of John II Komnenos of the 12th century, preserved in a mosaic in Hagia Sophia. Byzantium was the imperial model for many European countries. Well, to conclude, Spain as a major country cannot remain outside the mainstream, cannot remain without a permanent basis of research in the Eastern Mediterranean. Research on the late Greek and Byzantine civilization is important for Spain not only because of the links that connected the two corners of the Mediterranean basin, but also because Byzantium was a major civilization that linked West and East for many centuries, a connection that is much needed today in the times of modern nation-states. When we look at Byzantium, we shouldn't think in terms of intricate theological debates or degenerate eunuchs, as is usually read in the press, but must rather take a look at this map and consider how many cultures and nations were influenced, wherever built or created by the Byzantine power. They have a common heritage, all these nations, a world heritage, I would say, that is worth to be explored, and Spain shouldn't remain apart. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have some minutes for making questions.
For your lecture. Sorry. Congratulations again. What is said in the Nubian inscription?
What is said?
The Nubian inscription.
In the Nubian inscription is... sorry.
What's the topic?
Oh.
Yeah.
No, okay. It's written in Greek, Alpha Omega, Neuse, Kai Buleuse, tu Pantocratoros Theu. Well, I think it's a bishop inscription. I don't remember the content now, but it was most of the inscriptions were written by churchmen, by bishops, were engraved, and many of them remain unstudied, especially not those inscribed on stone, but those painted. The Polish missions in Nubia were very active, and you find a lot of material now in Warsaw, in Poland. The biggest museums for Christian Nubia are in Poland. Even in Poznan, every city in Poland has a small section of Nubian inscription and frescoes, and there is, recently there have been no excavations in Nubia because of the political circumstances. We know this trend is unfortunately very general in many modern countries, and many of the excavations are old. And this slab, I don't remember exactly where it is, but it's for a student of the Greek language. Easy to read. It is the 11th century. I mean, this is amazing. Copt was also used along with Greek by the Nubians, but Greek remained so as a vehicular language. Perhaps to distinguish Christian Nubians from Ethiopians, who were also part of the Byzantine Commonwealth but used their own language. And they tried to differentiate themselves from the Copts in the north, in Egypt, and the Ethiopians in the south. So they remained faithful to Greek, but it's easy to read.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
So I am take the microphone. I wanted to ask about the society, this Byzantine Spanish society, and now that we are also in the Instituto Cervantes and so, how are the links with our colleagues in Latin America? Do they have interest in Byzantium there on the other side of the Atlantic? Do we have some members that maybe come from Argentina or Mexico? I don't know.
Well, that's a very convenient question. Well, there are two main societies for Byzantine studies in South America, the Byzantine Society of Chile and the Byzantine Society of Argentina. They are the two main societies for Byzantine studies in South America, and they are members of the International Society of Byzantine Studies. Also in Brazil they had, and there are some interest in Byzantium in Colombia and in Mexico. But as societies with publications and regular and continuous activity, only Chile and Argentina. We have some Argentinian members of the Argentine Society who are also members of our society, because we are open to all the Spanish-speaking countries, and we publish, if you browse in our web, you will find all the publications in Spanish or by Spanish scholars listed in the web. Obviously, we are in permanent contact for making known the publication of our colleagues in America to the European universities, because in fact we are one of the only one major country in Europe that hasn't Byzantine studies at the university. So we are already known in Europe, but our colleagues in America have even bigger difficulties to be known by the mainstream research in Europe. No?
Thank you.
Any more questions? Well,
there was one.
Could you please show the photograph of Cordoba? About the...
No, sorry. Again.
Are we talking about travelers who went there in order to make this?
The artisans, so I mean...
Yeah.
We have Arabic sources, not Greek sources that detail the exchanges. We have, Arabic texts recording the exchanges rather than Greek sources. So, and they are very enthusiastic about the influence and the books, the Greeks or the Romans. So they are also never named Greeks, but always named Romans, brought to Spain at the time. And there are even so detailed studies for the books, and art historians have, this is not a field of discussion, proof that the mosaics were made by Orientals who came to Spain. It's not a debated issue. It's clear that it's not made by the Arabs, by the Byzantines or by the Romans.
Fantastic.
It's the mihrab. This is important because there was just a minute, but an ongoing discussion about the ownership of the complex. We started a discussion about this topic when the problem with Hagia Sophia became to the fore, when it was converted into a mosque, and we protested against that. Rather, we looked inside at our own problem, because who is the owner of of the Mosque Cathedral of Cordoba. And we started as association to defend the public ownership of the building. But it is a very difficult issue because we are entitled to begin with the discussion because of the mosaics, because they are Byzantine mosaics. But in fact, our colleagues in the Arabic studies are divided about this. And well, I mean, it's an important thing because it's not only universal because of the Arabic and Christian parts of the mosque, but also because of the Greek influence in the mihrab, that is the most sacred place of the mosque.
Yes, please. And congratulations for the presentations. Would you be so kind to make a brief reference to the primary sources for the study of Byzantine matters in Spain?
For the studies of
primary sources for the study of Byzantine world in Spain.
You mean for the Byzantine occupation of southern Spain, or?
Yes, yes.
Well, no sources. Archaeological, mostly archaeological.
Mostly archaeological.
Mostly archaeological. I mean, it is very weird, but in fact, there are no Greek sources about the presence of the Byzantines in Spain. Procopius, who is the main source for the wars of Justinian, ended his narrative before Spain was conquered by the Byzantines, and we don't have any historical record of the Byzantine.
No Christian, no Arabic.
Well, it was before the Arabs. We have only the record of the Arab occupation of the Balearics that happened later. Then we have Arabic sources that speak of the resistance of the Rum in the island against Arab occupation. This is the islands, the Balearic Islands. But southeastern part of Spain that was reconquered by the Visigoths before the Arabs arrived to the peninsula, this more than 100 years of Byzantine occupation of the southern part of the peninsula are not recorded in any source. I mean, neither Latin nor Greek. For the Greeks or for the Romans, it was a very distant land, and the historians didn't pay attention to what was happening in this part of Spain. We don't even know where was the capital. I mean, we suppose it's Cartagena, but some scholars argued it was Malacca. So it's really, we have two inscriptions and a lot of archaeological findings, but
evidence, yes. Thank you.
I think it's enough. No?
Any more questions? No. Then our last lecture. No voy a estropearlo. Okay, our last lecture by Professor Jorge García Sánchez of the Universidad Complutense de Madrid, Lost in Foundation, the long journey of Spanish archaeology to a school in Athens with stops in Rome, Cairo and Amman.
Thank you very much. So, as my colleagues before, I want to thank the Instituto Cervantes, the Spanish Embassy, Professor Horacio González Cesteros for the invitation to be here in this research day and the warm reception. Warmer thanks to the thunder striking yesterday in a road plane. My conference is going to be a little bit different from the rest because it doesn't deal with a current or past project, but try to be a short, brief history about the attempts to found a Spanish institution in Athens from the 19th century. So it's the long journey in my title. Along with the Phoenician navigators and the maritime powers of Carthage and Rome, Greece has been and continues to be a reference point for Spanish historiography when it comes to explain the impact of colonization, Mediterranean trade, and political and military enterprises on the societies that populated the Iberian Peninsula in antiquity, on their traditions, technologies, and crafts. However, it is paradoxical how little Spanish archaeology has intervened directly in Greece, in contrast to two phenomena: the importance of Greece in our research history, for example, in the identity debates between the originality of the indigenous people and the exogenous influence that the Greeks and other Mediterranean peoples may have exerted, and secondly, the profound interest in Greek civilization and art in Europe since the Renaissance, but especially since the 18th century, which led in the following century to an explosion of excavations in Greece and Asia Minor. So I wonder, is the historical lack of major Spanish excavations in Greece precisely due to the lack of an institution in Athens? In recent decades, or today, I believe that this is the case, but the question from a broader perspective is somewhat more complicated. The reason why Spain did not join the panorama of European archaeology in Greece and in the Eastern Mediterranean in general is rooted in the historical lack of a colonial presence in this area, which did occur in the American and African continents. In the Mediterranean, unlike the almost continuous possession of the Kingdom of Naples and Sicily or Sardinia until the contemporary period, the Crown of Aragon lost his ephemeral Greek duchies as early as the 14th century or San Island in the 15th century. Historically, therefore, Spain has not paid attention in these moments or in the present to the reality of Greece and Asia Minor or a Near East so far removed from its interests, as a result of which it remained a region that was generally largely unknown outside restricted scholarly circles. For all these reasons, with the exception of certain state initiatives, as much related to the artistic as to the archaeological field, the Spanish presence in Greece and the Middle East was based on the personal efforts of a handful of diplomats, scientists, artists, philologists, and antiquarians who publish accounts of their travels or even collect ancient pieces. This is the case, for example, of the man on the screen, the war reporter Hellenist Saturnino Jimenez, companion and translator of the politician Francesc Cambó on a 3-month trip to Asia Minor in 1923, whose description can be read in L'Asie Mineure en Ruine, 1925, and it's quite significant to note it was first published in French and in Paris. Less is known about his lectures at the Geographical Society of Madrid, in which he narrated his years of wandering through the Balkans, Greece, and Asia Minor between 1877 and 1881, the result of which was, in Jimenez's words, the production of 200 topographical and landscape sketches, the compilation of 80 unpublished Greek and Byzantine inscriptions, the discovery of more than 50 sites unrecorded by other travelers, among them, supposedly, the theater of Bura, but also the excavation of the Trophonius Anthros in Beotia. As we can see on the screen, from the perspective of some contemporaries, such as Bernard Husolier, Jimenez's Hellenistic passion could one day lead, and why not, to the founding of a Spanish school in Athens. There is only one enterprise directly linked to the world of archaeology worth mentioning for the whole of the 19th century with a state-level involvement that target the countries of the Eastern Mediterranean. It's the adventure of the Spanish Navy frigate Arapiles, sent by Amadeo I of Savoy to the Orient in 1871 with the mission of seeking commercial links and reinforce national prestige beyond our borders, especially in Greece and Turkey. This travel is well known to Spanish researchers, but perhaps not so much to our foreign colleagues, so it's worth sharing it with you. The founding of the National Archaeological Museum in 1877 was the final trigger for a warship to take part in a cultural initiative and to dock in numerous ports in the Mediterranean basin in order to acquire ancient pieces that would increase the museum's collections. Of the 3 members who made up the archaeological committee of the museum, I will single out his chairman, Juan de Dios de la Rada y Delgado, head of the Prehistory and Ancient History section of the National Archaeological Museum, and its future director, who ensured that the excavations were visiting the ports where they landed, the collection and the organization of the museums were documented, and contacts were established with local scholars. And the architect and fine art scholar, Ricardo Velázquez Bosco, who took on the task of copying the monuments, ruins, museum artifacts, and sites visited by the committee. Some drawings made by Ricardo Velázquez Bosco on the screen. Time constraints and the meager financial resources available for the purchase of antiquities limit the committee's possibilities, but 319 archaeological pieces were nevertheless transported to Madrid, many of them obtained thanks to the generosity of private donations. For example, in Athens, Juan de Dios de la Rada procured casts of the main monuments of the Acropolis and more than 50 Greek bases. In Cyprus, the Arapiles left the island having obtained 30 Cypriot ceramics, a number of sculptural fragments from different periods, as well as coin and glass vessels. The Spanish delegation was limited to the accumulation of materials, a collection that was not based on a specific or systematic research project, a methodological shortcoming that made its action more similar to merely enlightened collection than to a modern archaeological program. The Spanish institutional panorama in Greece bears no resemblance whatsoever to the context enjoyed by our research in Italy. Spain currently has a cluster of organizations such as the Spanish Academy in Rome, the Spanish School of History and Archaeology, and the more recent Cervantes Institute, centers that have become firmly integrated into the artistic, historical, and archaeological panorama of Rome. I will focus on the Spanish Academy in the Monte Gianicolo, in the Gianicolo Hill, since at a certain point in his history, it could have served as the basis for Spanish archaeology in Greece, as it was responsible for the exploration of our architects in the Mediterranean, a professional category in which the artists and the archaeologists were united. The Rome Academy, which depended on the Royal Academy of Fine Arts of San Fernando in Madrid, brought together painters, sculptors, architects, and musicians who had been pensioned. Today we will refer to them as scholarship holders, more than pensions, in Rome by the Spanish state since 1873 in order to complete their training in their respective specialties. But the Spanish artists had already been traveling to Italy to train professionally since the 18th century under precise rules. The academy's intention was the architecture students should familiarize themselves with classical archaeology and devote themselves during the formative years to researching, measuring, and drawing the monuments of Roman civilization, and that with the knowledge they had acquired, they should restore the ancient appearance that they would have had in their flourishing days, in their heydays. Their progress, the pension progress, was demonstrated by the execution of the plans and drawings that they had to send annually to the Madrid institution, the so-called envíos or envoi or deliveries. Some of these deliveries made in Rome by Spanish architects and artists. In the middle of the 19th century, in this Roman academy, still without the headquarters on the Gianicolo Hill, the 1851 pension regulations made it compulsory, obligatory for architects to study Hellenistic buildings from Greece or Sicily or Pompeii, and shortly afterwards also the antiquities of Egypt, the Holy Land, and the Mediterranean in general. As a result, Greece and Magna Graecia remained an unavoidable stage until the 20th century, and their monuments the main subject of the deliveries, or the envíos. These monuments sometimes led to archaeological excavation themselves. Francisco Jareño's drawing up of the plans for the temple of Hercules in Agrigento required him to carry out a series of archaeological excavations, and the School of Architecture in Madrid would later receive some of the architectural elements that Jareño took with him. That's the elements indicated in the text written by the own architect, by Don Jareño. The 1947 regulations, so 100 years later, still stipulated that architects had to spend 3 months in Greece, Egypt, or the East. Here you can see some example of these plans, like the facade of the Parthenon by Jerónimo de la Gándara, the first scholarship holder to go to Athens. And maybe you can see also the Catalan tower on the left in the portrait made by their own Jerónimo de la Gándara. And the portico of the Caryatids of the Erecteion by Manuel Aníbal Álvarez. The interesting collection of sketches by Roberto Balbuena, drawn in 1916, which depict the impressive monuments of Agrigento and Siracusa. The plans of the Theatre of Taormina by Antonio Flores. And the drawings of the architectural and sculptural fragments of the Museum of Olympia by Fernando García Mercadal, dating from 1925. In the second half of the 19th century, reaching the goal of Greece and showing his ruins to the public was to be consolidated as an event with repercussions in national science, linked to the cultural prestige of each state, in line with the political turbulence that was sweeping Europe. This is when the foreign institutions on Hellenic soil that still survive today were first established. L'École Française d'Athènes, the German Athenian Institute, or the British and American schools. Unlike the other Europeans, neither the Spanish archaeologists nor the Spanish architects had a national headquarters to welcome them on their arrival in Athens, but a number of proposals were made to change this. In fact, I have found, and other researchers too, an early reference in one of the talks given by Saturnino Jiménez at the Geographical Society of Madrid in 1883. The reporter alluded to the means Spain could use to, and I quote, restore our prestige in those lands, in a speech that intermingled the modern needs of trade with nostalgic memories of the Battle of Lepanto and the trace left in Greece and Anatolia by the Almogávares, that we well know thanks to the lecture before. Memories, and I continue quoting, that give us the right to take an interest in the people of the Levant. To Jiménez, one of these means to restore our prestige in those lands was to send the Spanish scholarship holders to cover the task carried out by the French and German Archaeological School in Athens, who would later become a prestigious group of professors of classical studies in Spanish universities. On the surface, this was no different from the trips to Greece that the scholarship holders had already made, except that Jiménez did not refer to artists and emphasize the archaeological aspect of the experience. Actually, he was entering into a debate held at that time regarding the models of academies that Spain should maintain abroad. This referred in particular to the academy in Rome, which was already considered archaic, as it repeated a model of scholarships that had been in use since the 18th century. Journalists, politicians, and artists such as Francisco Maria Tubino or Teodoro Anasagasti defended the idea that the study of art should be complemented by the cultivation of historical science and archaeology. It was understood that rather than an academy, what Spain should sponsor in Rome was an artistic, archaeological, institute with repercussions in the Spanish scientific sphere, an establishment similar to the one planned for Athens a few years later. The main proponent of the idea of finding a school in Athens was the archaeologist José Ramón Mélida, thanks to his contacts with Théophile Moll, director of l'École Française d'Athens, established during a trip to Greece and Turkey in 1898 in commemoration of l'École's 50th anniversary. Already at this time, so at the end of the 19th century, but also in 1922, 25 years later, with Omol already retired from the direction of l'École, Mélida received the invitation for Spaniards to join the section of foreign specialists who collaborated with their French colleagues at the Athenian headquarters. The French approved the creation of a foreign section around 1900. The first invitations were sent to Sweden, Norway, the Netherlands, Russia, Italy, and Spain. When Mélida reported this invitation to the Academy in Madrid, to the Academy of San Fernando, he emphasized the advantage of accepting this opportunity, both for archaeologists and artists, for whom the contemplation of the monuments of the East could serve as a complement to the teachings or academy in Rome, he said. The Academy in Madrid supported the idea that the scholarship holders in architecture, sculpture, and now also in archaeology in Rome, after a period in Italy, would go to Athens for 6 months to a year, where they would attend courses at l'École and accompany French scholarship holders on their expeditions. If they decide to undertake excavation, the Spanish administration will pay for them. But in the following years, the project was put on hold, was suspended. In 1925, the dictator Miguel Primo de Rivera was interested in reviving this project with the idea of founding a Spanish school of archaeology. Then, in 1927, 2 years later, Mélida again issued a report at the request of the government, in which he stressed that the purpose of the scholarship in Athens should be to produce specialized personnel for university chairs in archaeological disciplines and for archaeological museums. Mélida thought that 2 scholarships would be enough, designed to allow them to reside 1 year in Rome and the following year in an official institution in Athens, grants that will be offered on a competitive basis to graduates or PhD in philosophy and humanities who will carry out work in the fields of geography, archaeology, and Greek and Latin languages and literatures. For Mélida, this institution in Athens have to be nomadic, a springboard for traveling through Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, and Egypt, studying from the classical civilization to the Muslim, including the Eastern and Byzantine civilization. The Spanish legation, so the Spanish embassy in Athens, and the Junta de Relaciones Culturales, the Board of Cultural Relations, drew up their opinions at the same time as Mélida. We are talking about 1927. The former, so the Spanish embassy, favored the idea that in addition to these doctors of philosophy and humanities, at least some of the scholarship holders should be still architects and sculptors of the academy in Rome, and that they should spend 3 years in Greece attending the courses and excavations of the foreign school there. The second, so this Board of Cultural Relations, stressed the importance of the receivers spending an initial period at the Roman Academy, but then joining the foreign section of the École Française d'Athens. The Ministry of State, having evaluated these reports, decided that there was still no suitable personnel to refer to the foreign institutions based in Greece, and that it would be necessary to wait for properly qualified individuals. What stands out in this report is also the struggle between 2 different ways of thinking about who should be promoted as representatives of Spanish archaeology abroad, whether artists or, broadly speaking, archaeologists, philologists, and historians. The architects continued to use the Spanish Academy in Rome as a base for these explorations around the Mediterranean. And unfortunately, as planned to establish a Spanish entity in Greece did not prosper, nor the establishment of closer ties with l'École Française d'Athènes, these trips lost the sense of direct experimentation that French architects enjoy on their national archaeological sites in Greece. The French scholarship holders made deliveries, envois or envíos, of monuments from Delos or Delphi, or other architects, French architects, serve as director or assistants on the excavations. Some of the plans and drawings made by French architects, such as Henri-Paul Nenot at the end of the 19th century in Delos, Camille Lefebvre, 30 years later, still in Delos, or Albert Gabriel at the beginning of the 20th century about the domestic structure in Delos. In 1935, when the Spanish architect José Ignacio Arbada undertook the task of carrying out the entire topography of the ancient city of Delos, the director of the l'École Française d'Athènes assured him access to the remains of Delos, but in return, he refused him any kind of archaeological operation and for the results of his research to be published in a scientific volume. The opportunity to cooperate with the French archaeologists had fallen through years early. It was not until 1937 that Arbada completed his task, so 3 years later. The 8 plans on which the great archaeological effort carried out by Arbada was based, the only international and pioneering undertaking in topography of a city of antiquity carried out by the Spaniard at the time, ended up as nothing more than decoration of different rooms of the Accademia del Gianicolo, or otherwise were restored and abandoned. Some of these plans made by Arbada about the topography of Delos, and section and details of a few monuments in the same archaeological site. Check also the artistical and archaeological quality of these plans. The politician Francesc Cambó, I talk about him, linked to Jiménez, to Saturnino Jiménez, also tried to create a Catalan school of Oriental archaeology in Athens in these years. Cambó paid for 4 years the archaeological training of a student, Josep Gibert, instruction in charge of the German archaeologist Gabriel Welta. This period had to prepare Gibert to lead this future school of archaeology promoted by Cambó. So we were talking yesterday about a fellowship holder becoming in 4 years also director of a Spanish institution in Greece. The young Catalan followed Welta in his excavations in AEGEAN and Naxos between 1928 and 1930, and in Palestine in 1931. But the dissensions between Cambó and Welta and Gibert's final disinterest in practicing archaeology in such remote places ended this other project of foundation contemporary to that of Mélida. Fast forward 60 years. In 1990, the Spanish National Research Council, the CSIC, sent researchers Pedro Bárdenas and Ricardo Olmos to Athens to assess the prospects for the creation of a Spanish School of Hellenic Studies. The report allowed to how for many years the idea had been floating around in the minds of our different governments. For example, in 1933, in the shadow of the trip of the training ship Bahía de Cádiz, in which university professors and students turned the entire Mediterranean into the setting of their classes. The 2 commissioners analyzed the functioning of 9 of the foreign institutions based in Athens and came to a number of conclusions, such as the dual educational and research function of all these schools, the importance of carrying out interdisciplinary studies on art, archaeology, history, language, religion, or economy of the ancient, medieval, and modern periods of Greece, and the importance of having a permanent headquarters a library open to Greek academics, and a periodical publication to disseminate the results of research. The plan was abandoned around 1992 as the thesis attention now turned back to Rome, where after 8 years of symbiosis between the Spanish School of Archaeology and the Academy of Rome, the Academy of Fine Arts, the former, so the Spanish school, regained its independence with its own headquarters in Via di Torre Argentina. But at the same time, the Spanish state was evaluating the same ideas, the physique, of having an archaeological center in Athens, but with a national perspective and combining funds from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Culture. On this occasion, instead of Rome, the idea came via Amman and Cairo. In both cities, Antonio Almagro's archaeological and restoration projects had led to the ownership of 2 rented houses in both cities. The general director of fine arts at the time, José María Luzón, thought of making these 2 mere rentals official. So in the early 1990s, the Amman rent was maintained and a house was acquired in Cairo, which the Minister of Culture, Jordi Soler-Tura, went on to inaugurate as the official headquarters of Spanish archaeologists in Egypt. It seems that after the cocktail session for important figures, the building only remained in direct use until 1996, but no official staff was ever appointed to manage it. It was dismantled in 2016. In the meantime, José María Luzón knew that the central key institution of this school had to be in Athens. It could not be any other way. He bought a house at 48 Erectiu Street for 60 million pesetas. The Greek Ministry of Culture that's the building in photographs taken by José María Luzón back in the 90s, with the own José María Luzón in the photograph, the man on the left. The Greek Ministry of Culture even informed Spain that if such an institute was created in Athens, it would be granted the management of the houses of the Castilian and Aragonese languages in Rhodes, then converted into a place of residence and a motorbike workshop, respectively. As you can see, this project was not the result of a fleeting idea, but of a project that required the collaboration of several ministries, multiple meetings between Greek and Spanish representatives, and discussion that lasted nearly a couple of years. There was also a ministerial order agreed between Culture and Foreign Affairs that regulated the institutional foundation of the School of Athens. Unfortunately, however, it was never published in our official state gazette, the BOE, nor was staff appointed to start up the institution. In July 1993, Carmen Alborch had been appointed Minister of Culture, and the Athenian dream once again suffered a setback, overshadowed by the extension of the Prado Museum, the foundation of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Barcelona, the legislation on Spanish cinema, or the establishment of the basis for the future foundation of the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. I'm not trying to criticize Carmen Alborch in particular, but instead the policy of damnatio memoriae that politicians and legislators always leave in their wake, so that new names with the new projects derived from their personal testes will appear in the history books. I'm finishing in a couple of minutes. The last initiative to update the problem of the foundation before the interest officially pointed out by the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid in 2018 was promoted within the framework of a research project that I had the opportunity to direct from 2010 onwards about the archaeological mission of the architect Herbada in Delos. In 2012, together with Professors Juan Pedro Bellón and Ivan Fumado, we managed the scientific meeting Greece and Spanish Archaeology, Historiography, Projects, and Perspectives, which was held at the Royal Academy of San Fernando in Madrid, a little bit like this research day, but 10 years ago. We invite our esteemed colleagues to present their research projects in Greece. And together we discuss these prospects for the future, which in terms of archaeology and the Hellenic world necessarily involve the establishment of a national institution in Athens. Some of these colleagues are here today, others are not. Adolfo Domínguez Monedero, Manuel Arjona, but also Xavier Aquilue, Gloria Mora, José Pascual, Francisco Gracia, José María Luzón. And so to conclude, around 1991, 1992, Spain had the opportunity to have archaeological agencies in Amman, Cairo, and Athens. The prospect of reviving those, at least in Jordan, as far as I know, has never been raised again. On the contrary, the school in Athens has always remained at the back of the mind of scholars and professors who carry out research in Greek archaeology. The creation of the Iberia Greca Center in 2006 was the best news for them, a breath of fresh air in the study of the Greek legacy of the Mediterranean. It only remains for me to hope that the meeting that brings us today to Athens not only marks another step forward, but also cements the definitive landfall of the long journey begun by Melida 124 years ago in 1898, the famous year of the disaster of the loss of the last colonies of the Spanish Empire, just to finish being a little bit dramatic. And in this last slide, I just write some ideas, some questions about the reason why a Spanish school of archaeology in Athens has not been found. That's what I think. Maybe other researchers can find another reasons. So, from the middle of the 19th century to the 30s, maybe a feeling of inferiority in relation to foreign science or foreign archaeology, at least. Existence already of the academy in Rome as a base for traveling to Greece. And back in the 1990s, in the physics side, effort and research focus on the Spanish School of History and Archaeology in Rome. And in the side of the Spanish state, changes in personalities and political agendas. So I remark this listing of general directors of fine arts. So in the main point of buying a building in Athens during the term of José María Luzón as general director, he was an archaeologist. And the other ones in the list, the successors of José María Luzón, were more interested in modern and contemporary art, even a director of the Reina Sofia Museum. So it's one of the possibilities. And I just finished about the debate in the 21st century with interrogations as maybe a beginning of the debate. I don't know. Thank you very much.
¿Podría hacer una pregunta?
Sure.
Sí. A ver, durante la época de José María Luzón en la Dirección General de Bellas Artes has dicho que no se publicó el acuerdo en el BOE, pero exactamente ¿qué era el acuerdo? ¿Era algo que había pasado por el Consejo de Ministros? No sé si, yo sé que tú no me puedes contestar esta pregunta porque hemos hablado esta mañana, pero si alguien sabe, no sé si el señor Domínguez Monedero sabe qué es exactamente lo que se tenía que haber publicado, ¿sí? ¿Qué tipo de acuerdo era?
Bueno, estaba redactado el proyecto de fundación y jamás fue publicado en el BOE. Me remito quizá a conversaciones con José María Luzón, que es quien estaba a cargo de la Dirección General de Bellas Artes. Luego te pasaré el contacto. Pero él mismo me dijo que había un acuerdo entre el Ministerio de Cultura y el Ministerio de Asuntos Exteriores. I was asked about this official publication of the foundation of the Spanish Academy or institution in Athens. And I just have to say that The person who did it, who was Professor José María Luzón, currently working at the Academy of San Fernando, the Academy of Fine Arts in Madrid, because he was the responsible for these agreements and conversations with the Greek state.
If I can add something, it was not published, of course, but in the parliament, some groups knew that there was a building bought by the Spanish state, and there was a project to create the school. And I have located, because it's very difficult to see in the diary of the parliament, the Spanish, there were at least two questions, parliamentary questions, by the I don't know, Izquierda Unida, parlamentario, Francisco Frutos, who at least 2 times asked in the parliament to the ministry, I don't remember who minister, what happened with the school of Athens. The answer of the ministry was that it was ready to be finished to create the school. I am talking about the 90s, so this is the only thing, you know. Many people knew that there was the creation of the school, but it was not published. But some parliamentary groups knew that thing, and they made questions about it in the parliament at least 2 times.
Además, en 2018 sí que hubo otra vez, estuvo a punto, ¿no?, de salir el proyecto. Creo que esta vez sí.
Yes. With the ministry, César Antonio Molina, I have put the photograph of the label in the building of Erexiu when the works were being carried out. And even it can be seen, I think, in the Ministry of Culture, the notes for the press, the Ministry Molina, in a celebration at El Cairo, commemorating 100 years of Spanish presence at Egypt. It was an exhibition in El Cairo, and he told in that celebration that in very few months the schools of Amman, Cairo, and Athens would be open. This is published in the Ministry of Culture, in the Ministry of the Ministry César Antonio Molina. But in the same way as Jorge has told, the ministry was moved, and the next ministry had not interest in the school. So I agree absolutely with this, with the idea given by Jorge. Yes. John. More questions?
Do you have any personal answer? Do you have any personal answer for the last void question?
For the present?
Yes.
No, I have no clue, no keys. I'm not even working anymore in Greece. I'm working in Africa, so I just can't present.
No, but I think that it's not a matter of Greece, but a matter of Spain.
Yeah, that's for sure. But as I was saying, now I'm working in other topics, continent. So I think it is for you, the people who has currently projects on Greek archaeology here, to debate about the best way to found a Spanish institution. But I don't know what's the solution of the key. Maybe we can debate now different proposals, which is also one of the goals of this meeting.
No, the matter is that we don't know where is the problem, not what the solution is, but where is the problem actually?
Well, the problem, we have many problems. One of them is, as you have seen, that sometimes I've seen that there are like projects related to different people, but with like a personal or private project. Mélida, in this case, José María Luzón, afterwards, Adolfo Domínguez Monedero. And then when one begins the steps to the foundation of the institution, something happens, some governmental change, and we have to start from the beginning. So it's, I think it's a political problem, mainly. Yeah.
I would say political priorities.
Sorry?
or political priorities.
Yeah, it's certainly a political issue.
Yeah.
And what you have to do is to gather people, and not a single person or an individual group, but you need to gather the academic interest in Spain and try to find the platform which is the most suitable, whether it's a combination of university, the Academy of Sciences, or the Ministry of Culture. I don't know. That's for you to understand what is the most appropriate platform, but then you can create a political interest. And what would help, of course, is if you had an idea for projects, because projects can only be run if you have an institution behind you. What I have understood from your project you have presented, you're always just the guests, and you are using infrastructures of other institutions, but you don't have anything of your own, which is of course the most costly and the most difficult to establish. But I think you have so many good arguments. You don't need to work on the arguments. You need to have a kind of push factor on a political basis.
That's true. Maybe we can just debate about that, or the ideas, or even, Adolfo, if you want to explain how was the 2018 project to found or to refound the Spanish institution.
Yes, very quickly. My team and myself, we had begun to work in the median law case. We knew that, according to Greek law, it was necessary to have a school. So we began to ask interviews to the authorities. We were received by the General Director of Patrimony of the State, of the Ministry of Culture, and after the civil work of the building at Erexio 48 has been finished, but the project was finished when the Ministry Molina was banned. The ministry told us that they had no interest in pursue the creation of the school, and they were interested in give the building to another Spanish institution in Athens. At last, the Instituto Cervantes took that building, and we talked to the Instituto Cervantes. In a first interview, we were told that the Instituto Cervantes was not interested, but when the change of the direction of the Instituto Cervantes, also we have been the support of the Spanish embassy in Greece. First, the Ambassador Lucchini, afterwards the Ambassador Rivera, and now the Ambassador Casajoana. But the new direction of the Cervantes, before the actual direction, it was interested. There was several circumstances. The second in the Instituto Cervantes, Mr. Rodriguez Ponga, had been staff in the Ministry of Culture. He knew very well the school because he has made, when he was in Culture, a travel to see all the buildings that Spain has bought, so he was very interested in that issue. Afterwards, Ambassador Lucchini was also member of the Instituto Cervantes in the central direction. The general administrator of our university had been also staff in the Instituto Cervantes, so we have a very, very good reception in our university and also in the Instituto Cervantes and also in the Spanish embassy. And we could sign the agreement between the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid and the Instituto Cervantes for they gave a space, a room in the Instituto Cervantes in order to create the school. But once signed the agreement, the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid saw several problems, legal and administrative, to put in function the terms of the agreement. So the agreement has died without any more actuation. So this is the the last news of this issue. The agreement has died in November of the last year, 2021. After 4 years, Spain, my university paid, I think, that 1,000 euro for the telephone, light, water of that room. But in any case, the university, we have very conversation with the General Secretary of the university, the juridical services of the university, but they didn't see very well the mechanism for the university could create. At least one minimal structure to carry out the school. So the agreement was signed by the university, did not anything, and the agreement has now it's not existent. So perhaps I has been told that perhaps is the moment to try another movement, perhaps with other universities, perhaps with here we have the proof that there are increasingly interesting Greek studies in Spain. Many Spanish students, my own students in the other universities, are coming to Athens to make their stays. So they must go to the other institution, American school, German school, because we have not. But there are increasingly many more people in Spain who are coming to Greece to make the doctoral dissertation, to collaborate in projects, and so on. So perhaps it's the moment we have I was told, the momentum to combine different initiatives, universities, other institutions, and to try to convince to the ministry. Perhaps this is a thing that is a state question, of course. It must be a ministry, it must be the government who decide to create, of course, in collaboration with Instituto Cervantes, with universities, and so on. Perhaps this is the moment, and perhaps this meeting is the first movement in that direction. So this is that I can say.
I just want to say something. So I think, there have been made mistakes, political mistakes, but also mistakes of us, scholars. We have not done in a good way. We have done that for sure. Then we can see here maybe there are some of the causes, feeling of inferiority, more focus in Italy. And I completely agree with Dr. Eder, from the Austrian Archaeological Institute, that we have to gather together and work together. I mean, your attempt with the Universidad Autónoma, maybe it was too small, just one university to pass forward, And we are today in the wonderful Instituto Cervantes. Mm-hmm. The Instituto Cervantes is a reference, not only in Athens, in many places. I live in Vienna, I live in Berlin, I live in Los Angeles, all around the globe, And it's the Spanish culture. Mm-hmm. Maybe we have to collaborate with them, maybe we have to ask them the experience and so, and for sure there will be problems with no matter who government. There will be preference for a contemporary museum in Bilbao, for sure. They are bigger than us, they are more important, But I think the only way to have something here is to gather, to work together. And maybe in the future, we have a space here in this institute, or we have another house, or whatever.
Any more questions? Okay. Then we make some
small remarks,
conclusions.
Adolfo and me. Let's go. And we have this intro. Okay. So, first of all, thank you again. Thank you, the Spanish Embassy. Thank you, the Instituto Cervantes. And thank you, the people who came here today I know some of the people came from other parts of Greece, and some of you are from private institutes, or from foreign institutes, or for Greek institutions. And we are happy that you came here to hear what we are doing normally from the other part of the Mediterranean. No? I think today we saw exactly the title, Mediterranean Connections. Greece, the Aegean, no, is on the one side, and we have on the other side even the Atlantic area of the Iberian Peninsula, and we have shown they were connected all around antiquity and also in medieval times. So the next step maybe will be in the future a Spanish school, let's hope, but first a small publication that we hope to have for the middle of the next year, maybe a little bit later, and we hope to give you as well to the foreign school and institution in order to record this day. No? And yeah, do you want to say something else?
Very few more, of course. Thank you very much to the Spanish Embassy, to the Instituto Cervantes, and all of you to accompany us to this group of Westerners who love Greece, love Greek culture, Greek history, Greek archaeology, and who would like our own school. Of course, collaboration is a very important issue today, and all my colleagues are shown that they are collaborating with many very important institutions in their projects, and they have earning a very good reputation in their works because certainly they are giving the vision of the other part of the Mediterranean in these Mediterranean connections. But of course, with institute or school of our own, the collaboration with other Greek institutions and with other foreign institutions in Greece could be more profitable, because we could apport also our students, our background, the ways we are used to work in Spain. That in Spain there are very many archaeological excavations. I think Spain is pioneering also in archaeology, mainly devoted at the Spanish Peninsula, of course. But I think that it could be very interesting for these Mediterranean connections that a Spanish institution could carry their researchers into Greece to collaborate at the same level with another foreign and Greek institutions. Perhaps this meeting can be, as Horacio also was told, the beginning of a new impetus. But in any case, I think that in this meeting we have seen the quality of Spanish research in many fields, from ancient Greece and epigraphy to Byzantine world, which is a very important part of our history, and mainly also of Greek history, of course. And it can be a small showroom of what is being done in Spanish archaeology with relation to the Eastern Mediterranean, with relation to Greece. So at least if we don't obtain the school quickly, at least I think that we have shown a panorama of the recent studies of our Spanish archaeologists and researchers, philologists and historians on ancient Greek history. Is our small apport to these disciplines, several disciplines, and modestly, I think that Spain can also apport some new data. So this is at least the good news. This meeting is a good news, and our acknowledgement to the Spanish embassy and to the Instituto Cervantes for having organized this one, and also to Horacio, which has pushed all of us to have this meeting at last. So for my part, thank you very much to everybody. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ για την προσοχή σας.